So, Mel, I am super excited to have you on today because we have had a couple of conversations behind the scenes when we've gotten together, and we have the best conversations around what sustainability looks like in business in 2024. And what I loved about our convos and why I was very excited when you agreed to come on the podcast is that you have really challenged my thinking in certain ways and expanded my thinking. I think is a really great way to explain it. In terms of this sustainability piece, which I know is something that you're really passionate about when we're looking at ethical marketing, ethical, if I can say, ethical branding. So I want to open today asking you to share your thoughts on what does a sustainable business really mean in 2024?
This is the big question, right? So a lot of people think of sustainability as being just about environmental sustainability, and that's not reality. The reality of the bigger picture, the world that we're operating in, that we cannot ignore because we don't operate businesses in a bubble, is that there are some serious systemic things going on around us that will impact our business at some point. And so as savvy business owners, keeping an eye and an ear to the ground on all of that stuff that's going on, and helping shift business models and shift value propositions to align with what the world is shifting to and what it is going to need. That's what sustainable business means in 2024 and beyond. The next 5 years are going to be very challenging for businesses, and small businesses that are sort of trying to play on in business as usual, I think, are going to really struggle. And we've seen echoes of that through the last few years, or it's been a few years. It feels like forever, and also not very long at all. The last 4 years or so, we've seen some impacts of what major disruptive events will have, the impact that will have on businesses. That's just a taster. And so I think, really smart businesses now are kind of they're looking at 5-10 years in the future and going, what does it really mean to be sustainable, and what does growth mean? They're challenging they're thinking about what growth actually means. And so I love your theme about smart growth, because it is anchored in all of those things. It's anchored in well-being for people, and it's anchored in responsible for planet. All of those things come to play. And so yeah, I'm fascinated by diving into and all the rabbit holes around what could business look like in a sustainable future, for a livable future, because that's actually what we're talking about here.
Wow, that's got me sitting upright. When you mention some of the challenges that are coming over the next, 5 years for business, small and large, I imagine, but particularly that's sort of on the smaller end. What are some of those key challenges, Mel?
Well, some of them we've seen already. So supply chain disruption is going to be huge, and that's as a result of climate impacts, for example.
Right.
So, if somewhere's flooded, or there's a boat stuck in a channel somewhere, or a bridge collapses or something, we've seen all of that happen in the last couple of years. That is going to continue because environmental impacts are going, Mother Nature's going, I've had enough. And this is real. And we're seeing that now. There's massive floods happening in Brazil. There's awful tornadoes happening across the States. There's wildfires. That happens here in Australia as well. That thing disrupts major supply chains. And so that's a reality, and not something that's within our control. So how might we rethink our business model? How might we rethink where we source where our supply chain base is? Do we localize? Do we collaborate with additional partners internationally to help secure a supply chain? There's lots of things that we can do, but having that reality check, I guess, is the key message here, that that stuff isn't far away. We've seen it happen before. We've all been impacted by it before, and it's not going away. So I think that's the major one that I can see. But also, human health impacts. If people are sick, and we're seeing that now. COVID's back around. We're doing a bird flu. Will they? Is that going to come? There's lots of that happening. That impacts people, and when we lose a third of our workforce to illness, that affects business as usual. So what does that look like in the future? How do we keep our people well? How do we support their health and well-being? How do we put structures in place that that support that ongoing? Because yeah, that's not going away either. So there's lots of those kind of elements interrelated, and that's the, I guess, the magic and the mystery of it, is that it is interrelated systemic things going on, and the smart business owners will sort of start to connect the dots and see where these threads might start to impact, or be thinking ahead and going, what if this were to happen? And so playing out some scenario planning, which can be a fun exercise if you if you indulge it. It can be quite fun and enlightening.
Well, I'm glad you say that, because I think that, we could come from two different angles on this. We could come from one of fear, that's doom and gloom, that, is that all sounds really scary, and bury our heads in the sand perhaps. Or we flip into, I love what you just said then, how could you have fun along the way? How could you make this? And it kind of, I guess what I hear in what you're saying too, perhaps for smaller businesses, as a board director, they're the kinds of strategic conversations you have in the boardroom, right? So we're talking about the future, that what are the impacts? We have a look at all the different risk scenarios that are out there that could impact the future of the, not-for-profit or the business that you're a board member on. It's bringing that thinking into a smaller business that isn't set up for a board, but as a business owner and a leadership team, we want to act as the board that steps away from the day-to-day doing and comes out and says, actually, we've really got to start to consider this for our business and the impact it's going to have.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that's where the magic, I think, is untapped at the moment. So that connects back to people having a sense of purpose and what they're here to do, and that, building team culture around that shared purpose and a shared vision. What does the vision of the future look like? What could the future look like? And what's our role to play in building that future? I think that's where it's exciting. And that's where you take the information, which is very heavy going and it's very hard to consume. And the very easy thing to do is to put the head in the sand and to ignore that and continue with business as usual. That's not strategically sound, commercially sound, or morally sound. That's not, we cannot do that. And I just got goosebumps myself because that's how big this is. We are privileged and privileged to live in a time where we've got these challenges ahead of us, but we have the tools and capability as people and as teams to help make that reality. So embedding back in purpose and figuring out what that shared vision is key to that. And amongst the team, that's where the brilliance is, collaborating as a team, where the work happens, not at the board level. That's setting direction, that's great. But there's so much untapped knowledge and skill within teams to unlock, to help build the business resilience and help shape what that strategic plan looks like through innovation. There's untapped potential there that I think is really exciting.
I'm just frantically taking notes here, loving this, because my brain is firing in so many different directions around. What I'm hearing in this is the question to be asking right now is, what are the potential long-term problems, impacts, like taking the time. And something else that I'm thinking about is, we talk a lot about business planning and how that's changed over the years, from actually just looking at 90-day sprints, for example. I remember back in the days in corporate, we would spend bloody months getting together a business plan, and then it would change. So there's this agileness to what is my strategic plan and doing 90-day sprints because it's changed. But what we also need to overlay with this is that still is great for the day-to-day. What am I doing for the next 12 months? And pull back, what are the conversations, even chunk it up bigger around that 5 to 10 years. And it's that higher level. Like, I'm writing down the different areas because I'm curious. When you said it's beyond environmental impact, there's two things here. I think when we talk sustainable, it's very easy for our mind to go to environment, Am I using recycled paper? Oh, side note, I just bought a new printer and it's ink. Like, I can't remember what they call it. Anyway, it's more environmentally friendly. It's easy to go to there. When we talk about smart growth, we talk about sustainability in business around empowering your team, having them step up, looking at maximizing opportunities with profit sales, etc., smart growth and peak performance. But actually, that's all great. Those two things are important. And on top of that, supply chain, human health, still looking at the classics that we talk about, vision, purpose. Generational change is another one that I wrote down, because if we think about, I can never remember the names of the different generations, but the younger generations, they want more purpose. They want to know, why am I here? There's a fulfillment. They're also changing the way of working in terms of going, I'm not going to work 80 hours a week and kill myself for this job, and especially if I don't know the purpose. So generational change is another consideration in terms of holistic, sustainable business. And AI.
Yep.
AI and the impact to people, to systems, to economy. Like, that would be, I'm kind of in my mind, is there a checklist of these different areas that we need to look at? And so that's just the things that are happening in my mind, kind of going, okay, where can we take this and how do we actually implement this in the business? And I love what you said, strategic, commercial, and moral responsibility, looking at these key areas. So I guess hearing back me share with you what I'm sort of thinking, what's missing, or what would you add to that? What kind of comes up for you as you hear me play that back to you?
Yeah, I think what comes up for me is again the connectivity of all of those things. So none of that's happening in isolation. The more AI we start to use, what are the actual benefits on people? Are we freeing up their time? If we are, what are we freeing it up for? More work? Do we want to be doing more work? What if we could leverage AI responsibly and sustainably, because actually there's a massive climate environmental impact of AI with the amount of power and energy that it requires. But that's another story. System, it's all connected.
Yeah.
But if we're freeing up people's time so they're not doing the tasks that a robot can do, what are we freeing it up for? Are we freeing it up so we can pile more stuff on their plate, or are we freeing it up so we could do a 4-day work week, and we can therefore support our people's health and well-being by having them work less on things that they're connected to purpose, they're doing work that's meaningful to them, they know what they're there to do and to make an impact. The business has a shared vision of what it is that they're working towards and are making that impact. What might the world look like if we were all able to free up that little bit of time? So I know it sounds a little Pollyanna, but I've been accused and celebrated for being an idealist. And yes, that's possible. It's within our grasp, and we in businesses especially have the decision-making capability to do that. And it's not a new thing. Businesses have been built this way. Businesses have been built as regenerative business, and that's the next level from sustainability is how can we give back as much as we are putting out, and that's where true value propositions come into play. So I think when you say back all of those things, it's all connected, and it starts with really understanding that that the thing I've been working on for the last almost 10 years is the true vision and true purpose that's connected. So a lot of company vision is, we want to be a $20 million company in the next 5 years. That is not a vision. That is internally focused. That is a business objective. A vision is, who gives a crap is a great example. What would the world look like if people had access to clean water? And we will give 50% of our profits from day one to these causes, and they have, and they're continuing, and they're growing, and they're that is the magic of what problem could we solve, what real world problem could we solve, and here's what we're here to do. And that that permeates through everything. I love that example because their brand personality comes to play. They're a toilet paper brand. They're a commodity, and they have turned toilet paper into a work of art that sits in the corner of your bathroom. You know, how dare they? And how amazing is that? You know, that's the bold kind of vision stuff that we need more businesses to come out. And people think that they have boring businesses. I always refer to toilet paper as the key example, or insurance, or, you know, there's all sorts of things. There is no such thing. It's just the way that you approach it. And I think when you anchor it in something that's really powerful like that, that's how we can start to make genuine impact, because that otherwise the businesses that are not delivering on a true value proposition, serving a real need, in the context of all of the things going on, the poly crisis, not just a climate crisis, it's all of them. Those are the ones that are going to endure.
Are you talking about the B Corp kind of businesses? They're B Corp, aren't they? That's that sort of like philosophy around giving back and...
Yeah. And B Corp's just one label, right? That's one of the labels, but social enterprise is, I guess, the broad term for that is having a social purpose. I argue all business should have a social purpose, or a purpose connected in some way to real world problems, because we've been operating in the world happily through capitalism, thinking everything's dandy and we can extract and, you know, and grow at exponential rates. We live in a world with natural limitations, and this is you know, this is not new thinking. There are limits. There's a limitation on natural resources. The natural resources we've been extracting for years are making us unwell and making the planet unwell. That doesn't seem very strategically or commercially sound to continue to extract said limited resources to do things that aren't actually benefiting human life. Because the output of GDP or the output of exponential profit, for what? That was never the purpose of business. The purpose of business is not to make money. That's the fuel that keeps the business going, but it's not the end goal. So just sort of, you know, shifting our own thinking about what's the target here? What are we doing? What does that mean for us? What if growth wasn't the goal? Like, you know, let's be $20 million. What if we could change or solve homelessness, or, you know, support marginalized communities, or build climate resilience, or all of the things.
Wow.
Oh, I love that, because also, so it's actually reframing. Growth isn't about the target. It could be growth, but it's contributing to these real world problems. And I also take away from this that it doesn't matter what size of business you are, you know, whether you're watching, listening, and I'm loving this for myself. I'm challenging what we're doing in our business. And I love that example with the toilet paper, because I think it could be really easy to go, yeah, but we're just this business. Okay, but that's so true. Toilet paper, you know, and who doesn't know, who gives a crap if you don't Google it, because, you know, you're missing out on really good toilet paper and making an impact on the world. Like, you know, and then they have a lot of fun with that.
And awesome emails.
Yes.
Awesome emails, awesome branding. Totally.
Engaged people, engaged consumers, supporting a cause, 50% of profits from day one. They weren't, you know, they weren't necessarily financially able, but they have done that. So you're right. It doesn't have to be when we get to X size or...
And so challenging, what are we doing now? Because I actually feel like there's this returning back to, almost returning. I don't know why that's sort of how I'm feeling now, because I feel like, you know, we have an opportunity as business owners or leaders to have this real world impact, and to actually stop and pause and go, the money's almost like the side effect of it. If we're focusing on what we're here to achieve an impact. And I guess the other thing, it can be real world impact, but it doesn't have to be huge. Mel, I'm curious to get your thoughts, because I really want this to be accessible to all types of thinking people, businesses, as they're listening to this. You can actually still make a real world impact, and you don't have to give 50% of profit to a third world country to help with, you know, toilets and sanitization, etc. Like, you can start with something smaller than that. But this is about challenging. Are you looking at these different key areas for future success 5 to 10 to 20 years in the future? And what are you really doing this for? Because it ain't just about money. And we talk about this all the time. The money, like if you're not inspired by the money, which even people who are when they hit the money, oftentimes they aren't. So it's not the thing. And also when it's about money, it's never about the money. It's about what are we going to do with that money? So let's kind of break that away and go, okay, if it's not the money, what for? What are we here for? What is that difference? Do you have any tips on where to start with this? So you talked about, insurance, the toilet paper, and but my vision, it's not, I'm just a boring business. Maybe what's a good question to ask ourselves, or where do we start with this so that it feels achievable?
Well, I've worked with so many businesses on exactly this. You start with, figuring out what's your purpose and what is your vision of a future. And once you get people talking about, answering those questions, like then the innovation, the ideas start to come in. What if that's our vision and this is what we do now, how can we get there? And we may never get there. That's the real caveat here. We may never see a world where everyone has access to clean water. We may never solve world hunger. We may never solve poverty, but there are problems. But don't stop. Don't let that stop you on the journey to get there. And for smaller businesses going, whoa, like there's no way we can solve world hunger. Of course not. But you might be able to support your local community in some way. And that's the other challenge, I guess, to businesses is think globally, act locally, which is such a trope, but very much, if we are in communities, how are we connecting with those communities and stakeholders there? How are we, fostering resilience there? There's obviously workforce implications, but well-being implications. The environmental impact of, the wastewater from our factory, for example. What is that doing to our community, and how does that impact? So there's things locally that we can be thinking about, but imagine, it doesn't have to be massive, but imagine if the goal for year one was support 5 Indigenous students towards greater literacy results, or support 10 families fleeing from domestic violence. That there are things that we can be doing that make massive impact. Again, just got goosebumps because those are the things that really matter, and then that expands, and suddenly when you're connecting to real, you can see the real impacts. That's also very fulfilling and engaging for people. So not doing it, the caveat here, not doing it in an impact washing-y, greenwashing-y way, because if it's not actually linked to purpose, it's going to fall over pretty quickly. It's not going to stick around. So connecting it in a genuine way, I think, is the challenge there.
And by greenwashing, so not doing it for the marketing gig, think about the real purpose behind it.
Absolutely. I always come back to that quote, and I don't know who said it, but integrity is what you do when people aren't watching, even though nobody's looking. So what are we doing day to day, even though we're not going to get accolade or a shout out in news media? What are we doing that's true to self and self in the company, the brand? That keeps us going, and that doesn't matter. We still made an impact and we feel good.
Yes. I also love how you said, what's our vision and what's our future? So actually, that's something I definitely am going to start applying straight away, even with our conversations, Ness, and with clients, not just what's it right now. And again, that distinction between the 2 layers of 12-month goals, 90-day sprints, and the bigger picture through these different kind of areas and categories that I've been frantically writing notes on.
I look forward to those discussions. It's really, it really is getting, it's kind of out of the box thinking. It's really stepping aside and bringing in a different aspect to smart growth in business, which I love this conversation for that, because all the things we talk about are really important in relation to growing your business in a way that's smart for you and for your team and all of that kind of thing. But it's also then, with the profits that you make within your business, what impact do you want to have with that? Because, it always astounds me around, you hear people who have billions of dollars and you go, what do they do with all that? Like they could just go, I was listening to a podcast and they said, it was a divorce lawyer, one of his clients had, his turnover in a year was more than the GDP of some countries. It's like, how this world's crazy. So
Mind-boggling. Yeah, and we let it get to that point where people that could happen at an individual level.
yeah,
And that, and similarly, there are very few companies that are kind of ruling the world right now.
yeah,
So
yeah.
we let that happen with the system that supports rampant growth, extraction, consumption. So that's the thing that comes up for me out of your reflections just then, Ness, was around the consumption element. And what do we do? What do we do with this? Is like get more. What if
Yeah.
we got less? What if
Yeah.
that's the goal?
Yeah.
And that was okay. And that there was a real strong rationale for us all to be living a better life.
Oh, it's just, it's such a beautiful topic to be talking about. I feel like we'd talk forever about it. Nikki, did you have anything to add before
Well,
we wrap up?
thanks. You
Because
always
I'm going to ask you instead of starting to wrap up, because I
Oh
know.
my gosh. Well, I think that the final thing, potentially, maybe I'll say more after this, I don't know, but is what's coming up for me as well is this yearning for slow living. So this consumption, this fast pace, we live in such a fast pace with technology, with all the things that are happening around us. And I really hope that a message that people are taking away, and that I certainly am taking away, is it's okay to go a bit slower, and that whole go slower to speed up, or to do less. The conversation you said around AI, having AI to support your people to be able to do 4-day work weeks. It doesn't necessarily mean job cuts, for example. Like, how can you implement and use these tools so that you can be even more profitable business, keep your people, support your people, and give them a better way of living? Going back to the pace of space, which again, Donna McGeorge, we reference her a lot. To really challenge our thinking around not having to do more with less, but actually how can we be smarter with the outcome that we're getting with doing less.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And I think on that note, I'm going to throw to you now, Mel. And we always end on an actionable action. And I feel like we've covered so many various conversations and topics in this. But if somebody is really inspired by this conversation today to do things a little bit differently, what would you suggest in the next 24 hours would be a great action for them to take?
Do you know what? I'm going to go straight for the heartstrings here and go, is this a personal reflection exercise?
Mm-hmm.
What will you tell your grandchildren or your grandnieces and nephews or the next generation when they ask you what you did when you knew all of this was coming?
Oh, goosebumps.
And then if that doesn't trigger something, like, I'm trying to reach straight for the humanity here, because this is what we need to do more of. Business is not a separate entity. The economy is not separate from humanity.
Yeah.
It is supposed to serve life. And so if we answer our question deep in humanity, are we okay with continuing on as we have, and with the pace that we have?
Yeah.
Or are we not okay with that? And if the answer is I'm not okay with it, what am I going to do about it? What are the things I can do? And there's lots, and small things like we've talked a lot about, but just taking time and creating some space to have those deep conversations now, urgently, please.
Yeah. I hear the urgency in that.
If you're looking for someone to have them with, all of Mel's details are in the show note. But where's the best place for them to come and friendly stalk you, Mel? Ness, they know you, but Mel.
They can definitely come and stalk me on LinkedIn. That's where I'm spending a lot of my time, and I'm happy to have conversations there too.
Friendly stalk people, friendly.
Thank you so much for joining us. It's been a fabulous conversation today, and I love your takeaway, actionable action. That's really, giving me chills. So you know what Nikki and I'll be talking about at our next weekly meeting. Thank you again. Have a beautiful week, people, and we'll talk to you next week.
See you later.
Thanks for having me.